Driven from his home, betrayed by his own people, and hunted by a jealous king, David had run out of places to hide. So in his darkest moments, when all hope seemed lost, what did he do? The answer wouldn't just save his life, it would forge the heart of a true king. This is the story of what David did when the world turned against him. A story of desperation, pursuit, a relentless faith that found refuge in the most unlikely of places. He was a national hero, the giant slayer, the musician who could soothe a tormented king with his songs. His name was on everyone's lips, sung by women in the streets. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. But the very song that celebrated his victory became the anthem of his exile. The applause turned into a death sentence, and the wonder boy of Israel became a man on the run. It all fell apart in the blink of an eye. One moment, David was the king's son-in-law and a celebrated commander. The next, a spear was whistling past his head, thrown by the very king he served. King Saul, a man eaten up by a corrosive jealousy, was now obsessed with David's destruction. David's first escape was a frantic one, a desperate flight from the royal court, helped by his wife Michal and his best friend Jonathan. He had to leave everything, everyone he loved behind. David's first move tells you everything you need to know about his character. He didn't run to a foreign power or try to start a rebellion. He ran to Ramah, to the house of Samuel, the old prophet of God. His first move as a fugitive wasn't political, it was spiritual. He looked for safety, advice from the man who had first anointed him, the man who represented God's authority in Israel. It was a sign that even as his world was crumbling, David knew where true safety was. But Saul's reach was long. When the king's men, and even Saul himself, came to Ramah to capture him, it was clear that no person, not even a prophet, could offer a permanent shield. David had to run again. Alone, with nothing, David made his way to Nob, a town known as the City of Priests. This is where the tabernacle of God stood, a beacon of Israel's faith. When he arrived, the high priest, Ahimelech, was trembling to see him alone, sensing something was very wrong. And right here, we see David's raw humanity, his fear, and his flawed desperation. He lied. He told Ahimelech he was on a secret mission for the king, a story he made up to get food and weapons without putting the priest in danger. Ahimelech believed him and gave David two things: the holy bread from the tabernacle and the sword of Goliath, the very weapon from his most famous victory. Think about the irony. Armed with the symbol of his greatest triumph, David was at his most vulnerable, and his lie, which was meant to protect, would have devastating consequences. A servant of Saul, a man named Doeg the Edomite, saw the whole exchange. He would later report it to the king, leading Saul, in a fit of paranoia, to order the massacre of 85 priests and the entire city of Nob. David's flight for his life had left a trail of innocent blood, a burden he would carry with deep regret. He later told the only surviving priest, "I have caused the death of all your father's family." From Nob, David's desperation drove him to an even more unlikely and frankly foolish place of refuge, Gath, one of the 5 capital cities of his sworn enemies, the Philistines. This was Goliath's hometown. Can you imagine the sheer terror that would lead a man to hide among the people whose champion he had killed, carrying the very sword that did it? But his reputation got there before he did. The servants of King Achish of Gath recognized him instantly. "Isn't this David, the king of the land?" they asked. "Isn't he the one they sing about?" The hero's anthem was now an accusation. Trapped and terrified, David's mind raced. His solution was humiliating but brilliant. He pretended to be insane. He started scratching on the city gates and let spit run down his beard. King Achish, totally disgusted, dismissed him as a harmless madman, asking his men, "Am I so short of madmen that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me?" David escaped with his life, but the experience left a mark. It's believed that after this terrifying ordeal, David wrote the words of Psalm 34. "I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. This poor man called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all his troubles." In the depths of humiliation, acting insane just to survive, David's faith was being forged in fire. He was learning that God's rescue often comes not in a show of power, but in the most humbling ways. After escaping Gath, David fled to the cave of Adullam. A cave, that was his new home. A dark, cold, empty hole in the ground, a symbol of his new status, an outcast, hidden from the world. This is where most stories would end, with a man alone and bitter. But this is where God was about to do something incredible. First, David's family joined him, choosing the life of a fugitive over the dangers of Saul's kingdom. Then, others started to show up. The Bible describes them with brutal honesty. Everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul, gathered to him. This wasn't a polished, elite army. It was a ragtag collection of the broken, the indebted, and the discontented, the outcasts of Israel. And in that cave of despair, this band of misfits looked to David, and he became their commander. What David did in that cave was game-changing. He turned his personal crisis into a community of hope. His hiding place became a sanctuary for others. God wasn't just protecting a fugitive, he was building the foundation of a nation. From the depths of a cave, the future kingdom of Israel was being formed, not with the powerful and privileged, but with the weak and the weary. This is where David, the shepherd, musician, and soldier, became David, the leader of men. Life in the wilderness was a relentless grind. The landscape was dry, rocky, and unforgiving. Yet it was here, in the deserts of Ziph and Maon, that David's most important survival strategy came to light. Day after day, as Saul hunted him, David constantly and deliberately inquired of the Lord. This wasn't just a vague prayer, it was a conversation, a direct request for guidance. The book of 1 Samuel shows this in detail. When Philistines attack the city of Keilah, David asks God, "Shall I go and attack these Philistines?" God's answer is clear, "Go and save Keilah." After the victory, he finds out Saul is coming for him. So he asks God 2 more questions. "Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me?" God replies, "They will." So David and his men get out of there. This was a man who wasn't just relying on his own smarts, he was actively partnering with God, asking for specific intel and direction, and then obeying without a second thought. In the middle of this constant chase, God also sent encouragement through a friend. Saul's own son, Jonathan, risked his life to find David in the wilderness. He didn't come with an escape plan, but with a message of faith. The Bible says Jonathan strengthened his hand in God, reminding David of God's promise that he would one day be king. It was a vital reminder that even when we feel hunted and alone, God can send someone to strengthen our faith. The chase hit a terrifying peak in the desert of Maon. Saul and his elite soldiers had David and his men trapped. They were on opposite sides of the same mountain, and Saul's forces were closing in. Capture seemed inevitable. There was nowhere left to run. It was over. And then, God stepped in. Just as Saul was about to grab his prey, a messenger arrived, out of breath, with urgent news. "Come quickly! The Philistines are raiding the land." Saul was forced to choose between his personal vendetta and his duty as king. He broke off the pursuit to defend Israel. God's timing was perfect. He didn't stop the chase, but he provided a rescue at the last possible second. As the scripture says about this entire period, day after day Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. The ultimate test of David's heart came not when he was running, but when his enemy was delivered right into his hands. In the caves of En-Gedi, David and his men were hiding in the shadows when King Saul entered the very same cave to relieve himself. He was alone and completely vulnerable. David's men saw it as a gift from God. "This is the day the Lord spoke of," they whispered. "I will give your enemy into your hands." Here was his chance to end the running, to claim the throne, to get his revenge. And David did creep forward in the darkness, but instead of a sword, he just cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And immediately, his conscience hit him. He went back to his men and rebuked them, saying, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed." When Saul left the cave, David called out to him, holding up the piece of cloth as proof that he had spared his life. This single act showed the depth of character that was forged in the wilderness. David's time as a fugitive had taught him to trust God's timing completely. He knew the kingdom was promised to him, but he refused to grab it with his own hands. He would let God be the judge. He had learned that true strength wasn't about the power to destroy an enemy, but the self-control to honor God's authority above everything else. David's years as a fugitive were a trial by fire. He was stripped of his home, his title, and his security. He made mistakes. He lied out of fear, and at times, he despaired. But through it all, one thing stayed constant. In his darkest moments, David consistently turned towards God. When he ran out of places to hide, he hid himself in the presence of the Lord. He asked, he prayed, he listened, and he obeyed, even when it was the hardest thing to do. This journey transformed him. He walked into that wilderness a celebrated young man, but he came out a king in his heart, long before he ever sat on a throne. He learned that God's protection isn't the absence of danger, but his presence right in the middle of it. Maybe you feel like you're in a wilderness season today. Maybe you feel hunted by your circumstances, betrayed by people you trusted, or cornered in your own cave of despair. David's story is a powerful reminder of what to do when you run out of places to hide. Turn to God, ask Him for direction, trust His timing. Because it's often in the wilderness, when all other hope is gone, that God does His deepest work, shaping our character and proving that He is our ultimate refuge and our perfect rescuer. What is your cave of Adullam right now? A place of hardship or uncertainty? And how can David's example of turning to God change how you get through it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story encouraged you, please like this video, subscribe for more content on the powerful stories of the Bible, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message of hope today.